A little girl asks Cristiano Ronaldo about God. What he says will warm your heart. Imagine being a little girl, no older than 6, sitting across from one of the most famous people in the world, her tiny hands clutching a microphone, her voice trembling as she asks a question that stops him cold. Do you believe in God? What happens next will make your heart swell. This isn't just any story. It's about Cristiano Ronaldo, a man known for his speed on the field, his dazzling goals, and his larger-than-life presence. But today, he wasn't talking about soccer. Today, he was talking about something much bigger: faith, hope, and what really matters in life. Stick around, because what he said next didn't just answer her question. It changed the way millions saw him forever. Cristiano Ronaldo is someone you've probably heard of, even if you're not into sports. He's got everything: money, fame, trophies lining his shelves, but deep down, he's still human. Behind all those flashy cars and magazine covers, there's a man who grew up poor in Portugal, wearing shoes held together by tape because his family couldn't afford new ones. That same kid went on to become one of the best players in history, but his journey wasn't easy, and maybe that's why, when faced with this question from a child, he didn't brush it off like some might expect. Now, let's talk about the little girl. She wasn't a journalist or an interviewer trying to get a scoop. No, she was just a curious kid at an event where kids were invited to ask questions to their heroes. You could tell she was nervous, her voice wobbled, and her hands shook as she held the microphone. But there was something brave about her, too. Out of all the things she could have asked him, she chose something deeply personal, something bigger than soccer or fame. When she looked up at him and said, "Do you believe in God?" you could feel the room shift. Everyone froze for a second. It wasn't the kind of question people usually ask athletes during these meet and greets. Most would expect questions like, "How do you score so many goals?" or "Who's your favorite player?" But this was different. Ronaldo leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowing just slightly. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Maybe he was thinking about how to answer, or maybe he was reflecting on his own life. After all, faith has been a big part of his story since he was young. Growing up, he lost his father to alcoholism, a pain that shaped him in ways most people don't see when they watch him play. And yet, despite everything he's gone through, he's always talked openly about believing in something greater than himself. So here they were, a global superstar, and a shy little girl, connected by a single powerful question. What he said next didn't just warm hearts, it reminded everyone watching that behind every goal, every trophy, and every headline, there's a person with beliefs, struggles, and hopes. The silence stretched just a little longer than expected. The little girl stood there, gripping the microphone tightly, her wide eyes fixed on Ronaldo. Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath, waiting for his answer. It wasn't just any question. It was one of those moments that cuts through all the noise, all the fame, and gets right to the heart of who someone really is. Ronaldo finally leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His expression softened, and he looked at her, not like she was just another kid asking a random question, but like she was someone important, someone worth taking seriously. "That's a very good question," he said, his voice calm but filled with sincerity. Then he started talking about faith. Not in some vague or rehearsed way, but like he was sharing something deeply personal. He told her how much belief in God had meant to him throughout his life, especially during the hardest times. He talked about losing his dad when he was only 20 years old, a loss that still hurts him even now, years later. You could see it in his face. The pain was real, raw, and unshakable. But instead of letting that grief break him, he explained how his faith gave him strength to keep going. He didn't stop there. He went on to tell her about the importance of gratitude, how every day, no matter how tough things get, he tries to remind himself of everything he has. Even though he's achieved so much, he never forgets where he came from. He told her about growing up poor, eating bread and milk for dinner because that's all his family could afford. Those memories are etched into him, shaping not just his work ethic, but also his humility. As he spoke, you could see the little girl relax. Her shoulders dropped, and she smiled shyly, as if she understood exactly what he meant, even though she's probably never experienced anything close to what he went through. There was something magical about the way he connected with her, bridging decades of age and experience with simple, honest words. But then, halfway through his answer, he paused again. Not because he ran out of things to say, but because he wanted to make sure she truly heard him. Faith isn't just about believing in God, he continued. It's also about believing in yourself, in your dreams, and in the people around you. And that's when it hit everyone listening, not just the people in the room, but millions watching online later. This wasn't just advice for a little girl, it was a message for anyone who's ever doubted themselves, who's ever felt lost or alone. Ronaldo wasn't just answering her question, he was speaking directly to the hearts of everyone tuning in. By this point, the atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. What started as a routine corner turned into something unforgettable. People weren't clapping or cheering, they were quiet, absorbing every word. Some might have even wiped away a tear or two. It was clear that Ronaldo wasn't just giving an answer, he was bearing a piece of his soul. But here's the thing, as powerful as his words were, they weren't over yet. Just when you thought he'd said everything he needed to say, he added one more line, a sentence so simple yet so profound that it sent chills down spines. And that's where the story takes its next turn. Just as everyone thought Ronaldo had finished answering, he leaned in a little closer to the microphone. His tone softened even more, almost like he was sharing a secret meant only for her, but loud enough for everyone else to hear. You know, he said, his voice steady but full of emotion, God gives us challenges not to break us, but to make us stronger. Every time I step onto the field, every time I face something hard in life, I remember that. And I believe he's always there, guiding me. The room went completely silent after that. No rustling papers, no coughs, no distractions, just pure stillness. It was as if time itself froze for a moment. The little girl blinked up at him, her small face lighting up with understanding. She nodded slowly, clutching the microphone tighter, as though she'd just been handed the answer to a question she didn't even know she'd been searching for. And then came the part that truly shattered hearts. Ronaldo reached out his hand toward her, palm open, like an invitation. Never forget, he added, his eyes locking onto hers, that you are never alone. If you believe in yourself, and trust in God, nothing can stop you. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. There was no arrogance, no pretense, no scripted perfection, just raw honesty from a man who's seen the highest highs and lowest lows, and lived to tell the tale. For a brief moment, it felt like the rest of the world faded away, leaving only these two people, a global icon and a shy child, connected by faith, hope, and humanity. In that instant, millions watching online weren't just seeing an athlete respond to a question, they were witnessing a lesson in resilience, kindness, and belief. Parents held their kids closer, friends texted each other clips of the moment. Social media exploded with comments about how this exchange reminded them of what truly matters in life. But here's the twist. As powerful as this moment was, it wasn't the end of the story. Because sometimes, the best stories leave you hanging on the edge of your seat, and this one does exactly that. After saying those unforgettable words, Ronaldo did something unexpected, something that made the entire room gasp. After delivering those heartfelt words, Ronaldo did something no one saw coming. He stood up from his chair, stepped closer to the little girl, and knelt down, so they were eye to eye. Then, with a smile that felt both warm and genuine, he pulled a small bracelet off his wrist, a simple black band engraved with the word faith, and held it out to her. For you, he said softly, so you'll always remember what we talked about today. The little girl froze for a second, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her tiny fingers reached out hesitantly, almost like she couldn't believe what was happening. When her hand finally closed around the bracelet, her face broke into a grin so big it lit up the entire room. She looked down at the gift in her palm, then back up at Ronaldo, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. That moment, that single exchange was electric. It wasn't just about the bracelet, it was about what it represented. Faith, strength, connection. A reminder that even someone as famous as Cristiano Ronaldo can pause in the middle of their whirlwind life to make a child feel seen, valued, and loved. But here's the thing, the story doesn't end there. As the crowd erupted into applause and cameras flashed, Ronaldo glanced over at the parents standing nearby. They were smiling, nodding, clearly moved by what had just happened. But then, just before he turned to leave, he leaned in once more and whispered something to the little girl, something too quiet for anyone else to hear. And that's when the real mystery began. What did he say? Was it advice, a promise, or maybe a challenge meant to inspire her for years to come? No one knows for sure, not yet, anyway. But whatever it was, it left the little girl beaming brighter than ever, clutching that bracelet like it was the most precious thing in the world. As Ronaldo walked away, waving to the crowd, the camera lingered on the little girl for a few seconds longer. She stood there, staring after him, her expression a mix of awe and wonder, and right before the footage cut off, she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, holding it close as if it carried all the answers she'd been looking for. Now here's the question I want you to think about. What happens next? Does that bracelet become a symbol of courage for her? As she grows up, does she write to Ronaldo years later to tell him how much that moment changed her life? Or does this story inspire others to share their own moments of faith and connection? If you want to find out, and trust me, you do, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because stories like this don't come around every day, and I promise you won't want to miss what happens next.